All right, so get ready because today we're diving into a topic a bunch of you requested: ancient beliefs about what happens after we die, specifically those pre-Christian traditions.
Yeah, we're cracking open the Pagan Book of the Dead by Claude Lecouteux. It's amazing for understanding how Europeans before Christianity viewed death and what might be waiting on the other side.
I feel like when most of us think about the afterlife, we're picturing those pearly gates, maybe even that angel playing the harp meme.
It's true, those images are everywhere in our culture. But Lecouteux, what he shows is a totally different way of looking at things. Death wasn't an ending, more like a transition, a continuation even.
It's a huge difference, right? Instead of a hard stop, it's like life, death, and whatever comes after. We're all part of this grand cycle.
Exactly. And this whole cyclical view of life and death, it was tied into how they saw the natural world, like the seasons change, the earth renews itself, and life just finds a way to continue even after death. And this all feeds into how they saw people who'd passed not forgotten. No way. They were revered, even feared a little because of the knowledge they carried with them.
Less rest in peace, more respect your elders, huh? But something you mentioned before really caught my attention: the soul. You said lots of pagan cultures didn't believe in a single soul, but in multiple parts. It's such a cool concept. Could you break that down a bit more?
For sure. So the idea we have now, one soul, heaven or hell, it's kind of simple compared to what many ancient cultures believe. They often pictured a soul as like these different parts, each with its own job and its own path after death.
Okay, now this is where things get super interesting. It's like having this cosmic crew following you even after you die. Got any examples of those different soul parts, what people thought they did?
Let's take the Norse. Along with their main soul, they have this thing called a fylgja, basically a spirit double that could even show up looking like an animal, offering protection or guidance. Then you've got the Slavic tradition. They had the domovoi. This was a protective house spirit, often seen as an ancestor watching over the family.
Whoa. So imagine part of your soul's off being a warrior in some afterlife, while another part is back home making sure the kids don't break your stuff. It really makes you think about how these beliefs must have shaped how people live their lives.
Totally. And it connects to another big difference, the afterlife itself. It wasn't one size fits all, not at all. Different cultures imagined all sorts of destinations for the departed, each one matching their values, their whole understanding of the world.
So not just heaven or hell then. What were some of the, shall we say, more popular destinations in the pagan afterlife?
Well, if you were a warrior, the Norse idea of Valhalla is probably the most well-known. Picture this massive hall where anyone who died bravely in battle gets to feast with the gods and fight forever. Pretty intense, right?
Sign me up. Although, knowing me, I'd trip and fall into the mead hall and miss the whole fight.
Well, there's always Helheim. Not exactly a five-star resort like Valhalla. This was the realm of the goddess Hel, and it was where you went if you died. Let's say less gloriously old age, sickness, that kind of thing. Think of it like a neutral zone. Not paradise, not punishment. Kind of like the afterlife version of that pile of bills you've been avoiding.
Okay, I'll risk the mead hall mishap then. Valhalla for heroes, Helheim for the more standard departures. But what about everyone else? Any cultures have a more, appealing version of the afterlife?
Actually, yeah. The Celts imagined this beautiful, enchanting otherworld. Think eternal youth, beauty, joy feasting, dancing, hanging out with gods and otherworldly beings. Sounds kind of like a music festival that never ends.
Okay, now that's an afterlife I could get into. But it makes you wonder, how did you get to any of these places? Was there like a cosmic travel agent where you picked your destination, and those multiple soul parts, do they all end up in the same place?
Now that's where things get even more interesting. The journey, it was often just as important as the destination itself. Remember Charon, the ferryman from Greek mythology?
Yeah.
Rowing souls across the river Styx.
Oh yeah, he's the one who makes you pay to cross, right? Talk about a cosmic toll booth.
Exactly. The Greeks believed you had to pay Charon to get into the underworld. And even then, it wasn't over. You were judged, kind of like that whole weighing of the heart thing in ancient Egypt. That determined if you got to chill in the Elysian fields, basically their paradise, or if you got banished to Tartarus, the place of punishment.
Classic Greece. Always got to have paperwork, even in death. But it seems like these trips, these rituals, they weren't just about getting from point A to point B.
Definitely not. They were about guiding the soul, making sure it had a safe trip, helping the deceased make that transition to whatever came next. These cultures, they didn't just say goodbye and that's it. They understood how important those final rites were, how powerful it was to honor the dead.
And speaking of funerals, let's talk grave goods. Viking ship burials are always cool to think about, sending someone off with all their treasures. But they had a reason for giving those gifts, right? It wasn't just about sending someone off in style.
You got it. Those offerings, they were actually practical, even if they were symbolic too. Take weapons, for instance. Burying a warrior with his sword and shield. It wasn't just symbolic. People believed he would need those in the afterlife, especially if he was headed to a place like Valhalla.
So, like, packing for a really long trip, but instead of sunscreen and a good book, you're bringing your axe and shield.
Exactly. Food, tools, everyday stuff, it was all included to help the deceased handle the challenges of the afterlife.
And it wasn't just the objects. It was how the body was treated, to cremation, burial mounds, even the position of the body. All meticulously planned to make the soul's journey to the next world easier.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, all the thought and care that went into these practices. It shows a level of respect for death, for the afterlife, that we don't really see much today. And that respect, it wasn't a one-time thing at the funeral. It carried over into every single day through the relationships people had with their ancestors. The reverence, of course, but also, and this is really interesting, the fear.
Okay, reverence, I get that. Honoring your ancestors, asking for guidance, leaving offerings. But fear, what were they scared of? Like those restless spirits you hear about in ghost stories.
You're right on the money. It's amazing how many cultures had this idea of spirits that couldn't, for whatever reason, move on. The Norse, like we talked about before, they had the Draug, those undead creatures guarding their graves. They could even leave and cause trouble for the living.
Ooh, that gives me the chills just thinking about it, like something straight out of those horror movies. But it wasn't all fear, right? I mean, death for them was just a part of life, woven into everything in a way we can hardly imagine today.
It's true. We tend to think of death as this distant thing, something to deal with later. But for these cultures, death wasn't just a part of life. It was a force, something to be reckoned with, a presence you could feel every single day.
So not just rituals and ceremonies, but like an awareness of death that shaped their entire worldview.
Exactly. You know those medieval sayings you see sometimes? Memento mori, remember you must die. Sounds kind of morbid to us now, but for them, it was a way of life. Remembering how precious life is, making the most of every day.
So instead of being morbid, it was like this call to action. Live life to the fullest because, hey, you never know.
Exactly. And this awareness, it wasn't just like grand statements. It even showed up in the way they looked at everyday things, little things that happened.
Okay, now that's interesting. What do you mean? Did they think their furniture was cursed or something?
Not cursed, exactly, but definitely full of meaning. Think about something as simple as a spinning wheel. Some cultures, they saw a spinning wheel left alone as a bad sign. A sign death might be near.
Whoa, spooky. Guess I won't look at a spinning wheel the same way again. Makes sense, though. If death was such a big part of their lives, it makes sense it would show up in weird places.
Totally. These beliefs were so strong, so ingrained, that even everyday objects, even just things happening, could mean something deeper. And that's what's so captivating about these ancient cultures, the way they wove death into their daily existence.
It makes you think, though. Are we missing something by trying to keep death at arm's length? Tucked away in hospitals, funeral homes? Have we lost that connection to the natural cycle of life and death?
That's a question worth thinking about. But by digging into these different points of view, these ancient beliefs, we can start to see death not just as an ending. It can be a transition, a change even. And maybe we can find a new appreciation for how precious life really is.
It's really amazing how these ancient cultures, they weren't afraid to really think about death, about the afterlife. They didn't have it all figured out, obviously, but they wrestled with these big questions in ways that still, resonate with us. It's like their stories, their beliefs, they give us this whole different way of looking at these mysteries ourselves.
You're so right. Think about the soul's journey, for example. It wasn't just, oh, where are you going? It was about the journey itself, the tough parts, the changes, the constant navigating the unknown. That's still something we deal with, don't you think?
It really is. And those journeys were never easy, were they? All the myths, the stories, we've talked about dangerous paths, scary guardians, the chance of getting lost. It makes you think maybe these stories were their way of dealing with the fear, the uncertainty that comes with death, even for them.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the Norse myths, those treacherous roads to Valhalla, Helheim always looming, or the Celtic tales, those heroes going into the otherworld, facing all these tests, temptations everywhere they turn. These stories, they weren't just for fun. They were a way for people to confront what scared them about the afterlife, maybe even find a way to understand it.
Like they're saying, Yeah, death is scary, mysterious, but we're going to face it head on with courage and with a good story to guide us. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. Not finding all the answers, but finding the courage to ask the questions in the first place, to say, hey, it's a mystery, and to keep searching for meaning even when we don't know what's out there.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It wasn't about erasing the fear or pretending they knew everything. It was about facing those big questions with, open hearts and open minds, using stories, rituals, their beliefs as a way to deal with how complex life is, how complex death is, and everything in between.
It's been really incredible exploring all these ancient beliefs with you. And you're right, it's less about getting those concrete answers, more about finding the courage to keep asking, even if the answers, they stay elusive. And for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has made you think about your own relationship with these questions and that you find meaning in, just the exploration of life, death, what might be waiting for us, that never-ending search.